Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Money Matters podcast, the show where we discuss important financial topics that were never covered in med school. I'm your host, Dr. Tarang Patel. Welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Money Matters podcast. I want to thank you all for continuing to listen to the podcast and continuing to make our numbers grow. And I also want to thank the many of you who have recently joined the Dr. Money Matters Facebook group. The group has grown by nearly 50% in the last month, and the discussions have been spirited. Please continue to add your physician and medical professional colleagues so they can join in the conversation as well. Some of our most recent popular topics have been determining your retirement number, and also Dr. Meru, an orthodontist in Utah who was recently profiled in the Wall Street Journal about having $1 million in student loans. In this episode, I interviewed Dr. Jason Mizell, a colorectal surgeon at the University of Arkansas Medical Center. He started to teach a class to residents and then fourth-year medical students about finances. As I mentioned in the intro to this show, most of us were never taught these topics in medical training, and it left us to figure it out for ourselves, often at great expense in terms of fees and financial mistakes. Dr. Mizell, like many of us, felt lost in dealing with these topics when he first came out of training. We're going to talk about his experience during the show, but he realized that he was not alone and decided to do something to help his colleagues and students. This class has become very popular, and hopefully it spreads to other schools. Perhaps we should have some of these topics addressed even before medical schools to avoid a Dr. Meru type situation. Okay, let's get started with my interview with Dr. Jason Mizell. Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Money Matters podcast. My guest today is Dr. Jason Mizell, a surgeon and director and creator of the Business of Medicine course at the University of Arkansas Medical School. Dr. Mizell, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So this podcast is about finance, and there's a lot of blogs and other physician financial podcasts and media out there now. But you created this course back, I think, earlier than most people were thinking about it. I think maybe the White Coat Investor was the only other person at the time who was blogging about physicians and finance at the time. So tell me a little bit about the course that you've developed and the origins of the Business of Medicine course.
Okay. So I started here as a new faculty in 2010. I did general surgery and then did a colorectal fellowship and then got recruited to come here as colorectal staff. And when I started, I believe it was my second day here, our billing and coding department brought me my CPT books and my ICD-9 books and dropped them off and said, okay, here's your books for CPT and for ICD-9. And I kind of laughed and said, well, what are these books? And so they laughed and said, that's funny. That's a good joke. And I was like, well, I'm not really joking. I really don't know what these books are for. And so that was the look of horror and disdain on their face for my lack of knowledge was pretty eye-opening. And so what I realized is that I knew a lot about, or I thought, felt like I knew a fair amount about colorectal surgery, but I didn't know anything about everything after my training stopped as far as the billing and revenue side of it. So I really felt this desire then at that point, because I was at a teaching hospital, that I did not want my residents graduating with the same knowledge deficit that I had coming out of my residency and fellowship. So I talked to my chairman, and we were just so happening to in this stage of where we were changing up our grand rounds and dropping one of our monthly lectures. And so I came to him with the idea and said, I'd really like to start teaching our residents about some business aspects of medicine and finance. And so he was welcome to give me an hour once a month in our grand rounds. And so we actually had two faculty members here that were very savvy in business. One's actually a surgical oncologist who has his own business. He's a CFP as well. And so he would give some of the lectures on some of the investing side of it. And then we had a guy who is very prominent in the American College of Surgeons who knows a lot about the healthcare on a national platform and national level. And so I brought them in and some other faculty and people that I knew could teach about business. And so we just created this curriculum and would give lectures during grand rounds that were mostly focused on business. And then once a month, we would give a lecture on personal finance that was more elective. That way, if residents wanted to come, they could bring their spouse if they wanted. But I felt like their required time, which is grand rounds, that I would make that something very business specific that would be more to their practice. And then if they wanted to learn the personal aspect of it, then they would come in the evenings. And so we did that for a couple of years. So that's kind of how it got started.
Okay. And so how was the response?
So it was quite good. It was very eye-opening for them because they had never had a faculty member that really had that interest in their education. Like nobody had ever really shown any sort of drive to help make sure they knew how to deal with money. And so they thought it was a little funny, I think, at first. And then we had a lot of faculty that were very disinterested. They would leave whenever the talks would start. But then as they realized what we were talking on, slowly the crowd became a mixture of residents and then our faculty because, as most of us know, we don't know anything about it either. So what started out as resident education became resident and faculty education.
Right. And I think that's a good point that you bring up because it's not an uncommon situation that you faced, like you said, when you first got out and you didn't know any of this stuff, because as far as my own personal training, and I would think most physicians, no matter what specialty they're in, they don't get that. There's not enough time. I mean, some of them might pick it up a little bit if they're doing some private practice type rotations or things like that. But there's very little formal training that I'm aware of in most specialties. So I think it's definitely a good thing that you brought up, and it's definitely a deficit. And like you said, a lot of your colleagues probably were feeling the same way when they started. But it's something that traditionally has been kind of, I don't know. It's not something we talk about. In medicine. I mean, we're supposed to be the healers, and we're well-paid healers for that matter. But we somehow just don't talk about money. So, what was the response from your other colleagues? I mean, you mentioned a little bit they initially stayed away, but how did you kind of get them to come around to it?
Yeah, so that's good question. I still get sort of this quizzical, confused look whenever I mention to people that I'm about to go give a talk on business finance or what have you. I mean, it's just so foreign, as you mentioned. I mean, nobody does it. And it's this kind of taboo topic that nobody likes to talk about, even the medicine side of it, like the billing and coding and our lack of knowledge there, much less everybody's personal finance and how they're doing with managing their own personal money, so it's just this funny topic where everybody knows it's a huge need, but nobody wants to address it. And then if you try, you get pushback a little bit. I think people assume that every physician doesn't know it. And so then when you try to begin to make yourself a little bit more known for it, they doubt you, I think, a little bit, because they assume that there's no way that any doctor can know anything about money. So I think I'm hopefully past that a little bit around here. But still, it's very common. And the other faculty members, like when I gave grand rounds yesterday, we had a few that stayed and asked very good questions. But still, some feel like they've got it under control for whatever reason and sort of move on. But it's fun. The faculty that really show an interest in it, you can get in some really, really fun, spirited conversations and throw out some ideas. And so it gets to be very interesting. And I like it for the residents because they see that it's not just my thing. When faculty stick around for the talks and they see that it really is something that's important, I think that adds some weight to the topic as a whole, and they realize that it really is something that really does matter.
Right. And I mean, and for the residents and the medical students, I mean, they get so much thrown at them during training about the academic side of surgery or whatever field they're in. It's probably a nice thing in a way to actually turn on a little bit different portion of their brain too, because it's also vitally important to learn these topics, but it is a little bit different than than obviously the remaining stuff that they're getting all day. So
Right.
So you said you started this course when you first arrived at Arkansas. So how has the course kind of evolved over the years that you've been doing it?
So we started off in the surgery department, and it really ended up being a pilot. I did not have the intention of branching out and doing a more broad application of it. What I noticed was that whenever I was teaching this, I can very distinctly remember being in the line at one of the coffee shops here on campus and talking to one of our chief residents and asking her about the course, and she just opened up to me right there in the coffee line and mentioned about how it's been helpful for her because she was carrying about $40,000 in credit card debt. And I could just remember that striking me so strongly that, these are residents that every day I'm taking them to the operating room and trying to teach them how to do laparoscopic surgery and cut out cancer and do all these complex things. And in the back of their mind, they're thinking, am I going to be able to, pay my credit card bill this month? Or am I going to be able to, get my loans paid this month? Or, should I really go buy this BMW or should I not, or whatever? And so it was things like that. I was like, wow, this is a problem that should have been behaviorally addressed before they even started making resident money, because these are some fundamental issues here. So what I did is I decided, rather than making the course surgery specific and only reaching 30 or 40 residents and students, that I would broaden it and expand it to be available to the whole fourth year medical school class, because I really knew they were right on the cusp of a transition into where they would go from paying to work to actually getting paid to work. So I decided that doing a course in the spring of their fourth year, really whenever they were pretty much past the interview season and their minds had shifted away from match and all that to where they could really just settle in and learn stuff that was kind of fun, at that point, and stuff that they really knew was going to really matter. Right. So I usually start the course now in about mid-January, and it runs through mid-April. And rather than the talks being surgery specific, they're much broader now. And so it's a 20-hour course, 20 hours of content spread out over 10 weeks. And with some gaps in there because I don't make them come during match week and some other holidays and things. But we do it every Monday night for 2 hours. So their clinical duties are done. Most students come in their workout clothes or scrubs or whatever and just sit and they'll eat food and bring their spouse. Some of them will bring their kids if they can't find babysitters or whatever. And we cover various different topics. This past Monday night was about life and disability insurance and estate planning. And so there's 20 hours that we do over the course of the spring. And I really enjoy it because whenever I am able to teach a topic such as retirement, I'm able to say, look, in 2 months, whenever you go to your new hospital, somebody's going to bring a piece of paper in front of you that says, pick out your retirement mutual funds and what you want invested in and give it back to me tomorrow. And so I'm like, this really does matter. You're about to have to make these decisions in 2 months. So you need to know this now, because it does, they have a little more skin in the game, I guess, because they know it's really about to happen rather than teaching a lot of stuff whenever they're first years when it doesn't matter as much.
You talked about curriculum a little bit, but kind of go into it a little bit more. What are some of the let's put it this: what are your most popular topics that you're teaching about?
The curriculum changes a little bit each year, but what I try to do, make sure that the topics are all relevant to the students. I want to make sure that it's one of those things where I don't teach what I think is important, but I teach what I know is important, but then also that they are very interested in. So what I mean by that is I survey all of the students at the very beginning of the course each year, and I ask them really 2 questions on the proposed topics. So I say, all right, how interested are you in topic X? And then I ask them, what is your knowledge level, self-assessed knowledge level? And then at the end of the course, I ask the same questions. And what I have found is the topics that they're always the most interested in is contract negotiation, because they know that's what's going to help get them paid. But their knowledge pretty much every year is always the lowest in that topic. They're always very interested in retirement planning and investing. They know very little about it, but are very interested. And then after that, some other ones that are interesting to them are malpractice. Things that they are less interested in are things like Medicare and Medicaid. We did that last year. They didn't have any interest in that at all, which is kind of funny, because I'm like, that's how you get paid. So very low interest in that. They have not very much interest in estate planning, and doing wills and stuff and preparing for their family. They like billing and coding, oddly enough. I think it's just because it's this non-descriptive thing that they know they need to know, but they know zero of that. But one of the most boring topics, billing and coding, and they genuinely have an interest in it. So that's encouraging. But that's some of the main topics. We also talk about home buying versus renting. I'll talk to them about physician recruitment. Like I'll have a recruiter come and talk to them and say, this is what we already know about you. This is what you should know about yourself. And this is why we're scouting you out and how we're going to try to make money off you and things like that. And the topic that I think is the most engaging to them and the one that really gives them the most aha moment is the one about budgeting and the personal finance side of it. One funny thing that we do with that each year is that we divide the class up into 4 parts, basically. And we usually have, of the 160 students in each class, about 120 of them sign up for the course as an elective. And so we divide them up. So there's about roughly 20 to 30 in each group. And we give one the hidden task of car buying, one house buying, one lifestyle, and one usually kids, college, and school. And we tell them, all right, which car do you want to buy? The Nissan, the mid-level Toyota, or the Lexus or BMW or whatever. And the house, do you want the $200,000, the $500,000, or the $1 million or whatever? We sort of give them examples. And every year so far, when the 4 groups come back together and they add up what they want to spend on lifestyle, it's always exceeds the theoretical budget we've given them of $300,000 a year. So it's this sort of aha moment for them where they realize, so you're telling me I can't have everything I want whenever I become a doctor? So it's like, no, you cannot. But that's always this lecture that I don't think they anticipate leaving with that sort of grasp of reality. But I always like to watch that scenario play out and the look of sadness on their face when they realize that I can't have, the high-end car and the high-end house and the high-end lifestyle and send my kids to private school. Like, no, sorry, you can't. So that's sort of the general overview of it.
Okay. And how over the years now, you've been doing this for a while, has the level of like pre-existing knowledge improved at all amongst the 4th-year medical students, or is it still, not to where you would like it to be?
It's still quite low. One of the questions I asked them is how many of them have ever taken a finance class ever, high school, college, whatever. Mm-hmm. And usually about 20% of them have taken at least just a single finance course. So 80% have never taken finance at all. But so they come in very, very deficient, and that's been consistent over each year. But what I am noticing is that the questions that I'm getting during the lectures do seem to be a little bit more solid, and you can tell their understanding is a little better. When we first started, when the home buying versus renting guy started talking, one of the first questions was, "What is a mortgage?" Like they didn't know what the word mortgage meant. But I don't get quite as many questions about that as much anymore. But we still do get some very basic questions, and honestly, I love those questions because that just helps reinforce to me how necessary the course is.
Absolutely. It's despite what's, for yourself and people like myself who do the podcast and things like that. But it seems like there's a lot of people talking about this now. Now, granted, we all have an interest in this, but you're absolutely right that it's probably we talk amongst each other. And there's a huge segment of the not just the medical student and resident population, but the practicing physician population that's still woefully deficient in some of these areas, and we're just getting a fraction of them. But anything is better than none. So
I totally agree. Yeah. And what I've noticed is that as more and more blogs roll out and things like that are available, it is getting a little bit to the point when you do have a student that's genuinely interested, it's beginning to be a little bit where it's like, wow, where do I go? There are quite a few resources now. Mm-hmm. So I feel like part of my job too is to filter through some of that and give them the stuff is very high yield for them, and say, look, if you're going to read 2 books, or if you're going to read 5 blog posts, here's what you need to read. Because I know that they're tired. They're at the end of their 4th year of medical school.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to have a lot of homework for them or anything, but I just want to point them to the stuff like, if you read nothing else, read this, this, and this, and this will at least get you going.
Right. So, you started the course a few years back now. Have you seen this type of curriculum? Has it been developed at any other school, or has anyone contacted you about kind of doing the same thing, or teaching them how to do this at their medical school?
Yeah. So I get probably an email maybe once a month or so from somebody that's seen the paper that we published on the initial part of the course, and then my piece that I wrote for the White Coat Investor. People will kind of find me in different ways, and I've spoken at a couple regional meetings, and then my name would be on the program, and so people will find it, my Twitter page and things. And so people will email me and say, what did you do? Can you send me the schedule? Can you give me an idea of what worked, what didn't, sort of troubleshoot. But I'm in the process right now of writing up our results of the 4 years of the curriculum. And we're going to try to write that and get that submitted as a research paper. And so I've done a pretty extensive lit review, getting ready to write the paper. And there are some programs that will do bits and pieces of our course. They'll do either just the business aspect of it, or just the personal finance aspect of it, or they'll cover both topics, but just have like maybe one full day, like a weekend retreat or something like that. But nothing really to the extent of this course, to the depth and the comprehensiveness of it, doing business and finance, because it ends up being about 60% personal finance, about 40% business. And so the content is pretty comprehensive, and it's spread out so that they can kind of chew on it and process it and think through it, and then come back with questions so that they can really be able to really digest it and know what they're dealing with and what they're learning. Right.
And I was looking at an article from University of Arkansas's own I don't know if it's just a flyer or a weekly, monthly journal that they put out, but they mention your course specifically, and it says the word is spreading amongst the students, and approximately, it says in spring of 2017, 100% of the students rated the course as helpful, and 90% said the course should be mandatory in medical school. So obviously, it's something that is necessary and wanted by the students. So one can only hope that this type of curriculum does make its way to the other medical schools, dental schools, any of these graduate programs, because we get so much stuff that we have to teach, and but some of the most practical things seem to slip by the cracks, and I'm glad that people like yourself are kind of remedying that. Let me ask you this: so you've been doing this for a while, and like you said, when you first got out, you didn't know anything about the professional side of it, the ICD-9 codes and stuff. How has this course has it had any impact on your own personal finance?
Yeah, so this is like our 4th iteration of the course. So I've heard the talk on taxes 4 different times now, and estate planning 4 different times, and the budgeting and cash flow. And every time I sit through these topics, and a lot of our speakers are the same because we have a pretty solid lineup now that we've gotten. I learn stuff every time, and I always tinker with my own finances, and whether it's a talk on malpractice and just how to protect yourself, or whatever it is, it's been very helpful for me. And now, as I have gone around to some of our residency programs and as I give talks on this, I'm constantly learning because I want to be prepared for questions that may come from the audience. And these students, they're smart people. These are some very smart medical students, and they catch on quickly, and they have some in-depth questions. And I often feel like, I'm glad you asked that to the tax guy and not me, because I'm not sure I could have handled that question. So I really like having the experts be able to give the lectures, and then I can get all this education essentially for free while I sit there. And so I learn stuff all the time and tinker with my own finances and try to make sure that I'm on the right trajectory for good, successful financial outcomes too. So.
And that's, honestly, that was one of my goals with this podcast, is similar, to be able to speak to people and just kind of get the right information from the experts. So, I think you, as kind of the person who kind of filters out some of this information and then guides the students in a way is invaluable. So let me ask you this, one more question about the course. If you could, so the University of Arkansas, the students are lucky to have this course, but if you're a medical student, let's say, across the country, and you're interested in this topic, what would the one takeaway, one point that you would like to make to fourth year medical students? If there's one idea that you could put in their head, what would that be about finance?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like, despite really not having any knowledge at all coming out, I felt like while I was a resident, there was so little time to try to self-educate. Like I know that I was with my attendings for a limited time. And so I needed to learn as much surgery as I possibly could in that amount of time. And that was all I had time for.
Right.
And I knew that whenever I graduated fellowship, that was it. There wasn't going to be anybody over my shoulder anymore. And fortunately, like you guys and White Coat and like all these different people have done such a good job of making resources available. You don't really need to have a mentor per se to educate in some of the finance stuff and to have a basic plan. And so I would say there is a little bit more hype about the finance, which I think is amazing and very good. But I want to make sure that while they are in training to be physicians, to devote themselves to being amazing at that. Right. Glean what you can off your mentors. And if you are super bored with your studying on nephrotic syndrome or whatever it is that you study, and you want to pick up something, then I would say, pick up the White Coat Investor book on your leisure time or your vacation or something like that. And just, get your basics in order, right. But don't feel too pressured to be able to know how the finer points of active versus passive investing or all that are, because that can come, but it's some basic behavioral principles that you'd want to do, contributing to retirement and not, overextending yourself, that you can get, I think, by some fairly straightforward, simple reading from you guys' podcasts or from White Coat Investor books or whatever. And as long as you've got that, then you're good. Don't do things dumb. Learn what you need to be learning, and then when you get out, then you can really fine tune it and know some of the deeper points.
Absolutely, I think that's it. I think one of the key things is that you made it through medical school, or you're going through residency. That is the primary reason you're there, and doing a good job at what you're training for. That's the best financial decision you're ever going to make. So make sure, like you said, you do great at that. But the other thing that I would add to that is that the rest of this stuff is really not that complicated, as long as you're doing some simple things. Yes, you get very esoteric into some of the terminology and things. But even if you understand those points, it's only going to be marginally, you might be marginally better. But the key thing is, like you said, being the best physician you can be, and just not making any heinous financial mistakes. And those are the big ones that you can learn about within a very short time. So
totally agree. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's good. Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Mizell, for appearing on this podcast. Is there any resource? Obviously, we mentioned White Coat Investor, but any resources that you might recommend to our listeners about finding out more about your own, your curriculum, your course, or just resources that you would recommend?
Yeah. So for my course, I always on Twitter, anytime I try to mention something finance wise, whether it's our speakers or when I go to other conferences, always hashtag it with Business of Medicine. And there's not many people that use that hashtag, so you should be able to find interesting little points and articles that I'll try to pluck out and retweet. So that's easy to follow. Right. And then as far as books, I get that question quite a bit as far as, do you have a syllabus or whatever? And I don't really. I'm actually in the process of trying to accumulate a decent list of articles for different topics. But I think one book that obviously the White Coat Investor book helped me quite a bit, but one book of recent that really helped me a lot was the How to Think About Money, the Jonathan Clements book. And that was interesting because I, as you mentioned earlier, we are taught to be healers, and that's what we're here for. And we put a lot of hours into making sure we do a good job of that. But I think sometimes we can get so lost in our purpose of what we're supposed to do, we almost forget what we like. And that book was very interesting for me because it's one of those sort of things like, if you had all the money that you needed or wanted, what would you do with it? And I had almost forgotten what that was like for me, because you become such a servant. And so I think keeping that mindset of as much as we don't like to talk about money, it is very real in our profession, and to not lose yourself so much in the profession, you forget what you really do enjoy and why you're working this hard.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that book is a good refocuser of because it does no good to earn a bunch of money, but then not really realize how you can use it to, further your plans and purposes and happiness. And so that book I think was particularly helpful for me. So.
Oh, good. I haven't read that one. I'll have to check that one out.
It's good. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. As far as the actual course itself, what I'm hoping is that once we get this last course completed next week, then I'll actually write it up, and then I'll try to put it out there as far as once the paper gets written, just to find out some more details and some of the ways we researched it. And I'll include our surveys and stuff so that if people want to try to roll this out at their own place, how they can get started with, surveys and things to try to make it academic. Because that's been a huge benefit to me, is in my academic setting, it has allowed me to proceed up through the associate professor ranks and things. And that's all, important in academics.
Absolutely.
So it's been helpful from that standpoint as well. So
great. Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank Dr. Jason Mizell for coming on this show and for starting this conversation and this course for the medical students at the University of Arkansas. It's great to see someone taking initiative to help educate our younger colleagues. Doing it in the structured way that he does really brings value to these students. Maybe some of you are already helping out your students or residents by bringing these topics up informally. If you do, please let me know how you're doing so you can tweet me or email to me at tarang@drmoneymatters.com, TARANG @drmoneymatters.com, all spelled out. Sometimes when you start learning about these financial topics, the basics such as interest, inflation, compounding seem pretty simple. But an article I read recently talked about how the majority of people around the world, they surveyed people in many countries, developed and undeveloped, and most people could not get even two of these questions right, two out of three questions correct. If you don't understand these fundamental concepts, you're going to have a hard time getting ahead financially. Once again, thanks for listening to this podcast. Please let your friends know, your colleagues know, and just share it with them. And please continue to leave us positive reviews on Apple Podcast. It really helps move the show up into the rankings, and so the appropriate audience can see it. More episodes are available at drmoneymatters.com. or on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. And the episodes are also available in audio on YouTube. They're also available in audio format on Facebook. And once again, I encourage you to join our Facebook group. And eventually, I'm going to be doing some Facebook Live videos with some of our guests, so that hopefully they can answer questions in a live session. Thanks for listening. I have some really good episodes coming out in the near future. And please email me if you have any suggestions for topics, or you can post them on the Facebook group, or you can tweet me. And lastly, if you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, if you do so in whatever podcast player you use, you'll be updated automatically when the podcast comes out.